Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video of 2024. Goodness knows what happened to last year. Gosh, it's flown by. Anyway, I hope everybody had a great Christmas and New Year. In the near future, I hope to be, well permitting, getting out and about again. But for now, I do need to warn you, this is going to be a monologue and a fairly lengthy one. So apologies straight out the box. If it's creative photographs you're hoping to see, you're going to be hugely disappointed. So now's the time to look for something else. But I've wanted to put this video together for quite some time. I've called it Don't Be a Wedding Photographer Unless. And I've split it down into 6 points that I want to cover, all of which I believe are pretty much equally important. I have to admit that it is now 20 years since I did my last professional wedding shoot, and various things will have changed, obviously. Not just the camera equipment that we use now, but also the fact that the majority of people going to a wedding these days will take photographs on their mobile phones. 20 years ago, it was more than likely going to be small, compact cameras, film or digital, and disposable Kodak type cameras. But allowing for that, the points that I want to cover, I think, are still very relevant. So I'm going to start off by point number 1, and that is, do not be a wedding photographer unless you are a people person. Now that might sound obvious. You need to be outgoing, happy, able to talk to people quite freely, but over and above that, you also need to be prepared to be quite forceful. The majority of wedding parties are consisting of 50 people and more. Now, when you are trying to marshal or herd 50 plus people into positions to suit you as the photographer, it's no good being all Mr. Nice Guy and, you've got to project your voice, you've got to be forceful in saying to people, right, okay, we need everybody in here for this shot, or we just need bride's family in for these, whatever it might be. Because at certain times of the day, all of the wedding guests, and indeed the bride and groom and their family, their priorities will change. Once the actual ceremony is out of the way, people can relax. Once they get to the reception, they're going to relax even more by having a drink and a chat to one another. But initially, be prepared to be forceful. Some people will be very cooperative with you. By all means, make use of the ushers. Their job does not finish when you leave the church. Make use of them at the reception. Get them to go back inside and drag out Uncle Ted and Aunt Mary, whoever it might be. Somebody might have sneaked off round the corner for a crafty cigarette, you don't know, but get them to help you as well. Point number 2, you have got to know your equipment. Obvious? Maybe, I don't know. But by that, I mean you've got to know it inside out. You've got to be able to, more or less, use your chosen camera gear blindfold. It's no good trying to scan through the menu on the back, changing ISO ratings, exposure compensation, all this kind of thing. You've got to have it up here. It's got to be second nature to you. That just doesn't only apply to your camera either. You need to be able to correctly use a secondary strobe unit, flash gun, if it's on a bracket or handheld, You need to be able to work out, fill in flash ratios, because your ability as the professional to take photographs using fill-in flash with a much more powerful flash gun than anybody else is going to have there, that can make the difference between your photograph standing out and you being eclipsed by somebody else. Whether or not you like using a tripod, and those of you that watch the channel will know full well that I don't often use a tripod, I would always recommend that you take a tripod with you to the wedding. Doesn't mean to say you've got to use it. If you're using medium format, digital or film, it can be beneficial. You can set the camera up on the tripod, you can frame everything, you can make sure the group is in the viewfinder in its totality, and then you can take the photograph by not having to squint through the viewfinder or look at the screen. You can actually look at the people and time the shutter release perfectly when you get them to say cheese or whatever it might be. Does anybody still use cheese? Don't know. But even if you don't use the tripod, it acts as a focal point. If we're talking about a reception venue, a nice posh hotel with green lawns and stuff, scope out ahead of time where you want to take your photographs, place your tripod down, and then when the people come outside, hopefully on a nice sunny day, God willing, they can see the tripod and they'll know straight away that that's somewhere where you are going to want them to be. Either, one side of it or the other. It doesn't necessarily follow that you are actually going to stand by the tripod. So always take a tripod with you. Make sure you've got ancillary lighting, strobe flash unit, possibly even continuous lighting LED panels so that you can do some portraits in inclement weather in a nice location inside the hotel, all these sort of things. And of course, you've got to take backup memory cards, batteries, you name it. Don't go with just the bare minimum. You must have spares, including a spare body. Point number 3, you as the professional have got to understand your client. Do not be a wedding photographer unless you've actually sat down with the bride and groom and talked through exactly what they want from you. You as a professional are there to supply them with what they want, not what you think they want. Sit them down, make notes so that you get a feel for exactly what they want. Show them examples. If you haven't got any examples yet, if this is your first go, download some off the internet and just show them the kind of things to give them a range. They will probably, the bride in particular, will probably have a very firm idea of the kind of thing that she wants. That will give you a basis, ground zero for actually building your relationship with the bride and groom. And it's so important, this, because a lot of things lead on to it, particularly right at the end of this 6-point list. Obviously, you will need to agree a price. Make sure that they understand what you are going to be supplying them with and how long you are going to be with them. Do they want you to start with photos of the bride having her hair and makeup done at mum and dad's house, right through to the very end of the reception, more or less, the evening disco or whatever it might be? Or do they want a more sort of truncated approach whereby you join them at the church, you go to the reception, but you just do, for example, maybe the first dance, cutting the cake, speeches, that kind of thing. So get it all written down, agree the price, get them to pay a deposit, and also get them to agree or understand, I should say, when you require the balance to be paid. Okay? Yes, I am using a crib sheet. I'm not that good. Point number 4, don't be a wedding photographer unless you know the locations involved. Now, I'm going to rely on a typical British wedding, so church followed by a reception at a, nice country hotel. If you haven't been to the church before, make sure you visit. Scope out potential shots for the photographs that you must get at the church. See if you can talk to the vicar. Some vicars are very traditional and they will insist on you only taking photographs from the back of the aisle. Other more progressive ones will allow you to stand more or less side on to the couple as they take their vows and exchange rings. You may have to work in combination with a videographer. All these things come into it. But scope out the location of the actual ceremony. Then, if they are moving on to a hotel reception, make sure you understand what that place looks like. Some hotels that I've been to are set in beautiful grounds, absolutely beautiful. Others are city centre locations with no greenery around them whatsoever. So you need to understand what is available to you to create some nice photographs for the bride and groom. It may well be, if it's a city centre hotel with no greenery, that you need to allow time to take the bride and groom and maybe bridesmaids and best man to a third location. For those of you that watched the video that I did on Port Sunlight, that's a particularly popular secondary location for bridal parties that are in that situation. In which case, again, it helps if you know beforehand, because when you meet the bride and groom and they say, oh yeah, we're getting married at this church and then that hotel, you can think, oh my goodness, that hotel, there's no greenery. So you can then suggest going to a third location, but that might involve changing the time of the wedding breakfast. All these things are interlinked. And that brings me on to the 5th point. We're nearly all the way through already. Point number 5 is the timing. You are probably going to be working for the best part of 8 hours. You will be tired at the end of it, believe me. Do not be a wedding photographer unless you can keep on the go and concentrate for that length of time. You've got to have an appreciation of the timing. If the bride wants photographs at her mum and dad's house before she leaves for the church, you've got to know how long it's going to take you to get from her house to the church. Then when you've done the ceremony, you've got to understand what time are they expected at the reception. Have they allowed time to go to a third location or not? Do not be late, because you will upset somebody. You will upset the vicar if you're late getting to the church. In other words, if you delay the bride getting to the church, the vicar will not be very happy at all. And if your wedding party is late getting to the reception, you will not be happy with the management of the hotel. Trust me. As an aside, I have lost count of how many bridal parties have been still waiting outside the hotel reception for the bride and groom to arrive with the photographer at the same time as my wedding party is turning up. So they're obviously at least 30 minutes late, if not more. And that's just bad organisation on the part of the other photographer. I'm sorry, that there should be no excuse. So timing is critical. And most importantly, if you divide your day up into sections, so you've got the bride's house in this example that we're quoting, you've got the bride's house, then you've got the church, then you've got the reception, and possibly another venue in the middle. When you leave the bride's house, have a checklist and make damn sure you've taken all the photographs that she wants before you leave. If they've got an elderly pet, a dog that she's been very close to since she was a teenager, she may well insist on you photographing the dog. For goodness sake, make sure you've got that photograph before you leave. Same at the church. Make sure you've got all the photographs. Did you get them signing the register? Did you get them exchanging rings? That kind of thing. Because once you've left, you can't go back. Which I think leads me on to the sixth and final point. Everybody says, yay! Point number 6 is insurance. Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, that's a no-brainer, and indeed it is. You should have insurance on all your equipment. Many photographers have had stuff stolen out of their car while it's been unattended at wedding venues. Some people have left items in the churchyard and then they've disappeared by the time the photographer gets back. Insure your equipment. But I'm not just talking about your equipment. You need to carry indemnity insurance. 20 years ago, when I was doing weddings, it was relatively unheard of for a photographer to be sued. In 2024, it's much different. If the agreement isn't carried out to the satisfaction of the bride and groom, they are well within their rights to sue you. Now, I'll give you 2 examples, one of which occurred in Britain, and the photographer was successfully sued by the bride and groom because 2/3 of his photographs were of the bridesmaids. And the bridesmaids were, how can I put it, well-developed young ladies with particularly low-cut dresses. So unprofessional, I can't begin to say. And he was successfully sued and he lost his business. Didn't have indemnity insurance. The other example, which is probably harder for you and I to appreciate, and I'm not sure whether this was successful or not, but I know that the bride and groom certainly tried to sue the photographer. If you look for it on the internet, you may well find something about it. But the images that I've seen, you and I would probably think, wow, fantastic stuff, great, marvelous, what's wrong? The problem was that the photographer took a lot of photographs from a long way away with a long lens. He was compressing the perspective and he was throwing the background way out of focus. Now, for everybody watching this, you're probably saying, oh, great, lovely bokeh, nice creamy backgrounds. No. That's not what the happy couple wanted. They wanted to be able to see the environment, see the countryside behind them, and they didn't like the way that everything was flattened, that the perspective was flattened. So it just goes to show, and that comes back to one of my original points. The second one, you've got to know what the client wants. You're not giving them what you want them to have. You've got to give them what they want. All right? Well, there we are. That's my 6-pointer. Don't be a wedding photographer unless you can tick off all 6 of those points, in my humble opinion. If you want to disagree with me, please feel free to do so. Leave me comments down below. I can't see this getting an awful lot of views, to be honest with you, this video. Who knows? We'll wait and see. But in the meantime, enjoy your photography, and I'll see you really soon for another enthralling video. Bye for now.